Just a day after North Korea threatened to sink Japan with nuclear weapons, another missile. The rocket launched on Friday morning, flying over Japan and landing in the Pacific Ocean, roughly 1,200 miles east of the island of Hokkaido, forcing residents to take cover. Reuters' Christine Kim reports from Seoul.
Analysts spoken to said this was a clear show of defiance from North Korea to show the international community it will go on with its nuclear and missile program, and that it doesn't really care about the recent sanctions that were passed by the United Nations Security Council. One expert also told me that North Korea may be feeling some pressure, that it needs to show the international community something, and that its threats are not just empty words.
It's the second time in 3 weeks that Hokkaido has had to sound the alarm, telling residents to hunker down as the North Korean rocket sped overhead. South Korea hit back immediately after Friday's launch, holding a military drill and firing a missile into the sea. Officials from Seoul say the North Korean missile flew for about 19 minutes over a distance of almost 2,500 miles. Far enough to reach the U.S. territory of Guam.
South Korean analysts and military officials from the United States believe the missile launched by North Korea was likely a Hwasong-12 rocket, the same type of intermediate-range ballistic missile that was fired on August 29th that also went over Japan. However, it seems to have been fired at a less sharp angle, thus permitting the missile to fly roughly 1,000 more kilometers into the Pacific Ocean when compared to the August 29th missile.
Barely 24 hours before the launch, North Korea vowed to destroy Japan, South Korea and the US for backing a new round of UN sanctions against it. The United Nations Security Council will hold an emergency meeting in New York later on Friday.
Breaking news out of North Korea. Japan right now in high alert after North Korea conducted its longest ever test flight of a ballistic missile over that country. And you're hearing those sirens. These were emergency alerts in Japan, text messages, loudspeakers telling residents in the area to seek shelter. This is the second missile launch over our key U.S. ally, Japan, in just a month. The missile traveling about 2,300 miles for about 19 minutes before it landed in the Pacific Ocean. But that is far enough, we should say, to reach Guam.
All of this coming less than 2 weeks after North Korea conducted its last nuclear test. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson calling on all nations to take new measures against North Korea. In a statement, he says China supplies North Korea with most of its oil. Russia is the largest employer of North Korean forced labor. China and Russia must indicate their intolerance for these reckless missile launches by taking direct actions of their own. And we should add, the UN Security Council is holding an emergency meeting on this afternoon.
North Korea has fired off another missile. It headed toward Japan. The Japanese government is saying it went over Japan into the Pacific. Let's go live now to senior foreign affairs correspondent Greg Palcott in Seoul, South Korea right now. Greg.
Brett, we're getting the information from a variety of sources. It appears that this projectile, this missile launched from the area around Pyongyang, the capital of North Korea, just a little bit before 7 a.m. local time here in the Korean Peninsula. That would be about a half an hour ago. It then flew eastwards, and by all accounts, it crossed the Sea of Japan, and it crossed the Hokkaido Island, the northern island in the archipelago of Japan, and apparently went further through into the Pacific Ocean. Now, this is the second time that this sort of trajectory has occurred with missiles coming from North Korea in recent weeks. It has alarmed Japan. It has called individuals, citizens, to go to shelters. We have seen that happen before in the last blast. We do not know whether this is an intermediate blast, whether it is an intercontinental ballistic missile. There was some speculation that a flattened trajectory launch could be made from North Korea. Once again, it would have to fly over Japan to reach its goal. If it was this flattened trajectory launching of a missile, then it could go deeper into the Pacific. We're waiting on that now. Of course, all of this is happening while North Korea very busy with its own rhetoric, its own talking, not just about the United States, but in fact about Japan during the day. Let's take a listen to what's been said today. Kim Jong-un's regime did launch more rhetoric. In the wake of the latest UN sanctions, state media is saying Pyongyang ought to use its nuclear weapons to reduce the U.S. to ashes and darkness. And U.S. ally Japan should be sunken into the sea. Japanese Prime Minister Abe, on a visit to India, stood his ground.
The whole of the international community must fully implement the recently adopted United Nations Security Council resolution and force North Korea to change its policy.
Secretary of State Tillerson in London, meeting with UK Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson and others, also promoted the UN resolution. Additionally, he called on North Korea ally China to do more.
I am hopeful that China, as a great country, a world power, will decide on their own and will take it upon themselves to use that very powerful tool of oil supply to persuade North Korea to reconsider its current path towards weapons development.
Back in Seoul, some are more pessimistic about the prospect of reining in the North Korean regime.
I don't think, unfortunately, there is any way to stop them now.
No way.
No way.
Leading North Korea analyst Andrei Lankov thinks that the North will resist sanctions and will only come to the negotiating table to freeze its nukes in exchange for concessions.
They want to get to the point when they have a sufficient number of their intercontinental ballistic missiles capable of destroying a sufficient number of the American cities.
Again, analyst Lankov talking about North Korea building up an arsenal of intercontinental ballistic missiles that could hit the United States. We don't know exactly what this missile was that was launched from Pyongyang in the direction of Japan over that into the Pacific Ocean, but certainly it is a part of this ongoing, very active missile testing program that we have seen from North Korea, coupled with a test a short while ago of a nuclear device, and it is an arsenal that now is beginning to be reckoned with. Brett.
You know, Greg, the last missile test was late August, and it was classified as an intermediate-range ballistic missile flying over Japan, actually that same area, that island you mentioned, Hokkaido Island, and there were U.S. Marines training on that island at the time when that missile flew over. They were not in danger, we're told by the Pentagon. I want to ask you about South Korea's reaction to all of this, and if their response has changed in recent days as North Korea has become more aggressive.
Japan and South Korea have become more aggressive towards this. We heard from Japanese Prime Minister Abe today demanding that the recent UN Security Council resolution be implemented, criticizing some very strong rhetoric that we had just heard, talking about Japan being sunk into the sea this morning on state media in North Korea. Maybe a hint of what was to come just about 24 hours later. Japan getting tougher, South Korea getting tougher. We've been watching the government here, much more saber rattling, much more military exercises. They realize they have a regional defense issue that they're dealing with, just as the U.S. deals with a longer range threat, Brett.
My phone translated as a North Korean missile launch.